Okay, today I want to talk about India inks. These are the Dr. P.H. Martin India inks, but any India inks will behave the same way. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, but Ace, those are the things that you use to write with dip pens, quill pens, something like that. Which you're absolutely right. That is what you do with these things. But there are many other things you can do with these. And I have discovered their wonderful properties because I have been on a diligent search for waterproof art supplies to use in my mixed media art journal. I never cared about things being waterproof until I started art journaling. And now, because you do layer upon layer upon layer of supplies, I have discovered the importance of having supplies that are waterproof so that the subsequent layers that you put on top of the lower layers don't make them reactivate, don't move your colors and things around. India inks are waterproof when they are dry. And it turns out there are a lot of things that you can do with India inks. So I wanted to share a couple of things with you. Hopefully this video will be helpful to you. I have these inks. I have a few more bottles. And I also received this big honkin' set from Santa Claus for Christmas. The other thing that I really like about these is that they are lightfast as well, which many of your craft and art supplies that you use for mixed media, for example, the Distress line, is dye-based, so it's not lightfast. It will fade over time. And I prefer to use lightfast materials when possible. So I've found that these are a great alternative to many other things. But anyway, so let's get into the different ways that I have discovered that these India inks can be used. So the first thing we're going to talk about is using India inks to make your own sprays, which is actually, or so the internet has led me to believe, surprisingly easy. I've never done it before. We're going to do it right now. So, a couple of things. Your normal craft sprays, like I mentioned, the Distress line earlier. I know Delusions does a version, and I don't know about the light fastness of those things or the water reactivity of those things because some of those are made for mixed media. But I do know specifically the Distress stains, because I have some, are dye-based and highly water reactive. And I like the effect that those sprays give, but I'm looking for something that's not water reactive, and again, that light fastness. If it's not going to last forever, it's not going to last forever. I get it, but if it could last a little bit longer, I'm not going to say no. So I'm going to take my India inks and I'm going to hopefully fashion my own sprays. So you'll see here I have a glass bottle that has a little sprayer with a tube, and now I've found a couple different ways online to do this, and the general options seem to go one of two ways. Either you add water to the India ink, or you add isopropyl alcohol, very high proof isopropyl alcohol. This is 91% alcohol. Now, first of all, we're, as of now, still in the pandemic, so it is sometimes very difficult to come across this 91% isopropyl alcohol, but also, I have read some places, though I've been getting kind of mixed messages, so I'm not sure how true it is, but I have heard that rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, can break down India ink over time, which might make it less light fast in the long run. I don't know how true that is. However, I'm going to err on the side of caution for my sprays, and I am going to use just bottled water. I know that you can use the India inks with water and you can dilute them with water, and they're made to be used with water. I know that they are. I don't know if they are, how compatible they are with rubbing alcohol. So just to be safe, I'm gonna use water. So the video that I found explaining how to do this, I will link it up here in the card. Whatever bottle you use, the little spray hose thing will always go down, obviously, to the very bottom of the jar. However, apparently, when you make these sprays, the ink can settle to the bottom. And then, of course, you give it a shake before you use it, but it can sometimes gum up the end of the tube. So she recommends snipping off the bottom like 1/4 inch to prevent that from happening. I've just cut it so that it doesn't touch the bottom of my glass bottle, and that should be fine. I've seen that they sell smaller ones of these. Instead of an ounce, it looks like it might be 1/2 ounce. It's a much skinnier bottle with a screw top. It doesn't have the dropper top. I like these because of the dropper top. Makes it really easy to just use the dropper, squirt in some into the bottle, and not make a huge mess. Okay, so I think I've decided I am gonna do cherry red first. Then I'm just gonna fill it up part way with water, most of the way. Leave myself some space in case I want to add some more India ink to it, but I'll fill it up pretty far. Also leave it some room so when I shake it up, it will have some space to agitate. Then we'll just give it a shake. Alright, I like that better, yeah. Yeah. Alright. So I'm gonna go with probably about 7 dropperfuls. These little bottles come with labels. Yeah, look at that. That's pretty good. So I'll just paint on the color. Now, the other thing that is great about these India inks is that you can not only make the colors that come in the bottles, but you can mix your own colors. I want to make that like vintage photo sort of color, that vintage brown color. I feel like that would be a really useful spray to have. Aha, there we are. It's only adjusted a tiny bit every time, but that's the color. To this bottle, which I filled about to the edge of the curve of the bottle with water, was 3 parts Van Dyke Brown, 3 parts yellow ochre, and 1 part golden yellow. And that makes a really nice, it looks a lot actually like tea dye distress ink, more so than vintage photo, but really like that color. So you can make sprays out of your India ink proper, and you can make custom mixes. Let's move on to another. You can put them into water brushes. They flow through a water brush just fine. These are as liquid as most things, anything. I have tried to put acrylic ink in water brushes before, and I have found that that does clog my water brush sometimes, but I have yet to have a brush clog from India ink. I think that it's safe to use in a water brush. Acrylic ink sort of is still on notice for me. In this water brush is my Black Star matte India ink. I love this stuff. India ink dries with a slight sheen to it, but this Black Star matte, it dries perfectly matte. It's so great. It's such a cool texture. So you absolutely can letter with these, as you see. It's very fun to letter with these, but also the other really cool thing about these is you can use them like a brush marker. Faber-Castell, so they sell these Pitt artist pens, and they have colored India ink in them, and they are waterproof when dry. These ones are the big brush ones. They just have a bigger tip. They sell them much finer, if that's what you prefer. And that's all well and good, that's great. However, Pitt artist pens are pretty expensive. This set of 15 pens was, I think, almost $60, like $55 or something. Say you already have, you know, some of these kicking around, you just want to try. You absolutely can make your own brush markers just by filling a water brush. They're very easy to fill. This is just a water brush I have that's full of water. My favorite ones are the Pentel Aquash ones, and whenever possible I try to get the fine tip. The fine tip is gonna give you the most flexibility for size. It's gonna let you get very fine lines, but you can also, you know, flatten it out on its side and get that with a stroke as well. So I would definitely recommend the fine point Aquash brushes, Pentel Aquash brushes. They're my favorite water brushes. I've tried several. Certainly haven't tried all of them, but I've tried several different kinds, and these are my favorite. But anyway, so for these water brushes and most water brushes, all you do is unscrew the top from the reservoir. This is my water brush that just holds water. All you do is, and I'm just gonna demonstrate, I'm not gonna actually do it because this is my water brush. You just can take, and the dropper fits kind of right in the little neck. So it's very easy to fill. There is a little fill line, if you see, marked on this water brush. See that little dash right there? That's about as high as you wanna fill these. You don't wanna overfill them, because the way you get more liquid down into the brush is by squeezing it, and if you overfill it, it becomes difficult to squeeze, so it can be difficult to get that ink to flow. But yeah, so that is another great application, and I have a bunch of colors in brushes. I'm gonna fill a few more, I think, but this is my green, blue, violet. So that is another great application for these. You can make your own brush markers. You can absolutely draw with them, color with them. What is these colors? How about an eye? I'm gonna go right down the middle and draw a pupil. It doesn't matter if you color over the top of the black with the other colors, as long as you let that black layer dry. When you go over the top of it with the other wet media, it's not gonna move. If you look, that ink, you can still see very distinctly that pupil didn't move. But I just slapped on those wet colors to make a gradient, and it doesn't matter. It didn't bother it at all. If you don't know if you're gonna like the waterproof brush markers in your mixed media or something, then, you know, buy a couple of water brushes and just test them out. See if you like using brush markers, if you've never used them before, or they are different if you're not used to them. That line variation can be a blessing or a curse if you're not used to it. So it's just another way to use your India inks. Now this next one is fairly obvious. It's usually, when you think of India ink, usually you think of a dip pen. So the next use I'm going to talk about is scribble journaling, actually, in your art journal. Because scribble journaling can look really cool if you do it with a fine liner or something. You have to make sure that fine liner is waterproof, and usually you only find them in waterproof fine liners in black. And this is just my glass dip pen. So that's also a like I say, a relatively normal use for India ink, but a use nonetheless. All right, I'm done playing. Another thing you can do is to apply the ink directly to the page and make drips. I love, love, love drips. So here I just have some orange ink that I'm applying to the top of the page. And you have to apply a little bit of excess, so there's some liquid to drip, and then you just tilt the page up. And if your drips aren't falling as much as you'd like, you can whack the table with the paper gently to sort of coax them into falling them, to force them to fall. You can also tilt the page different directions to coax the drips to fall in different directions if you want, to try and control them a little bit. But yeah, so drips, that is a great way to use your India inks. And again, once dry, it will take a little while to dry. I have noticed that India ink does take a little longer to dry. I'm not sure if it's because it's so thick or what exactly, but like watered down acrylic paint for drips does dry faster, or like spray paint for drips does dry faster, but these will work. You don't need anything else if you don't have anything else. Now I know acrylic paint is cheap. However, if you wanted to buy a supply that would work kind of the same way that acrylic paint works, but not have to buy different colors of paint and things, even if they're only, you buy the craft paint, it's only like 50 cents, $1 a bottle or whatever. If you save all those dollars and buy a set of India inks instead and a bottle of gesso, you can do the same kinds of things plus all these other techniques I'm showing you in this video. So might be worth your while. All you're gonna do, scrape off some of this clear gesso. Then to that, I'm just gonna add a drop of sepia for one tangerine. Sure, why not? And I literally just put a drop of color. If you want more intense color, you add more. It's very simple. And then you're just gonna take your brush and give it a mix. Now see, it's a very light pastel-y sort of orange, but the color will dry a little more intense than what you see when you first mix it up, because what you're seeing is the gesso looks white, but when it dries, it'll be clear, like school glue. So let's do that. Here we go. There's the one drop of tangerine with probably, I'm gonna say that was probably about a teaspoon of gesso. Here, I'll mix up the sepia. And if you don't want this to be transparent, you could also mix it with white gesso. Just be aware that you may need more pigment if you're using white gesso and you want a really vibrant color, because the white gesso will definitely dull down the color a bit. So let me add another drop of tangerine and another drop of sepia and see what kind of color variations we can get. But yeah, if you use the clear, it's gonna end up like almost like a glaze, I guess. Now see, that one's much darker, again, because I added a second drop of color and I had used up some of the clear gesso. More pigment, less gesso, logically means more vibrant color. And I'll be back in a few minutes when it's dry. Okay, checking back in with the India ink and clear gesso mixture. This is what we've got, and as you can see, I would compare it to kind of like a watercolor because it was the clear gesso. If you mixed the ink with white gesso, it would be more like a gouache. It would have the opacity that white gesso would afford it. You just have to use a little bit more pigment. You definitely can get some different variations and some different sort of textures by mixing your India ink with your gesso. let's talk about splatters. So splatters are awesome. They add an element of like chaos, I guess, to your art, which is always fun. All you have to do is get a cup or a small vessel of some kind. It doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna put a dropper of black in the bottom of this cup. Add a little bit of water just to thin it out. Oop. Or a lot of water to thin it out. But because these are so intense and pigmented, that's okay. I'm just gonna mix it up with my brush a little bit. All right, now you want that brush really saturated, like to the point that it's almost gonna drip. See that bead that's kind of appearing at the end of the bristles? There's a drip there. That's how wet you want this to be. Hold it up above your image, your page, whatever, and give it the old tappa-tappa. And it will make lovely organic splatters. You can control the size of your splatters depending on how much water you add. And for a more variation on splatters, you can also just take the dropper from the ink bottle itself, kind of fill it a little bit with ink, and just kind of, if you give it a hard shake, you can kind of get bigger, harder splats, if that's what you're looking for. It all depends on what kind of style you're looking for, but you can definitely do a lot of different kinds of splatters because ink is so thin, and you can thin it more. You can definitely get a wide variety of splatters. Okay, now let's say that you like to watercolor. Mixed media is not super friendly toward watercolor. You can do it and then use something like distress glaze or a spray varnish to sort of freeze the watercolor so it doesn't reactivate when you add a layer of something like matte medium on top of it. But if you want to avoid that problem entirely, then you can watercolor. You can do something similar to watercolor with the India inks. It won't look the same. You can dilute the India inks with water, so you can get that sort of variation you get with watercolor. It will be, usually I find that India inks are much more punchy than your traditional watercolors. Watercolors are softer. I will do a quick demo for you just so that you can see what I mean. So as you can see, you can get that sort of watercolor effect if you wanted, if you're looking for that. And let me see, is it dry? Yeah, it's pretty dry. You can, we'll test it with water first. This is, again, my water brush that's only got water in it. Fill that up with water. You can see it doesn't move it at all. I'm scrubbing, I don't know if you can see, I'm scrubbing my water brush and I am making sure it is full of water. I just dripped some water on the paper even. And it is just not moving. It's great. So that can be a double-edged sword because with watercolor, one of the things you can do is if you decide you don't like something, you can come in with a wet brush and lift most of it off. But obviously, once you paint this down, that's not an option, it's permanent. So there's pros and cons to both, certainly, but if you want that watercolor sort of effect to paint in your art journal, this is a great way to achieve that and have the result be permanent so you can layer on top of it and not move your color. Okay, as for another thing you can do with Bombay India inks, here a piece of paper. What you can do is you can use this as ink to stamp. I have here just a little alphabet stamp, and I'm just going to put it on my palette, just a couple of drops, and I'm kind of gonna move it around a little, and I'm just going to pounce it in the ink, stamp off a couple of times because ink, it is hard to stamp with straight ink. But there you are. I wouldn't use it for particularly intricate stamps. I don't know how well that would work, but for simple block letters like this, it does pool a little bit if you don't stamp off that extra time. And you can actually stamp more than once, it looks like. Let me see if I can find a more intricate stamp just to see if it would work. Okay, I have here a dark red stamp. Just a little stack of books, and it's a bit more intricate than my simple letters. We'll see if it stamps. I have the feeling it won't come out very cleanly, but we can try it. I'm just putting it on an acrylic block, as so. And I think, I don't have a big enough space in my palette. Well, so this is just the plastic wrapping that was around my Dr. P.H. Martin's, the big palette of 12 inks. It is just a plastic surface. You probably could put the ink out on your glass craft mat. And I don't know if it will stain my silicone mat, so I don't want to test it on it. It sort of works. The ink tends to pool, especially where there are open spaces between the intricate lines, so I'm not sure that this is the best plan. I might stick to simple letter shapes, I think. You just have to get a feel for how much ink is too much and how hard you have to press down. It's different than stamping from an ink pad, definitely. And it does really stick to the paper. You do have to peel it off. I would say this is a solid possibility. The letters work great. I do like the large, simple letters. See, so this one worked out okay, but it took a couple of tries to get there, and there's definitely an art to it if you were gonna try and do this with intricate stamps. Also, I would expect this to probably stain stamps, especially photopolymer stamps. They tend to stain very easily, but it wouldn't affect the stamping performance of your stamp most likely, as long as you didn't leave clumped up ink in your stamp. That might change how well your stamp stamps. So if you do try this technique, just make sure you clean off your stamp really well. See, I've gotten out all the ink out of all the little crevices just by running it under a faucet of water and blotting it with a paper towel, just to make sure that it doesn't, gunk up the open spaces of your stamp, because then you might get some excess stamping that you don't want. Okay, so I can't find the video footage I shot for stenciling, so I'm just gonna have to show you it in practice on this art journal page I did showcasing colored indie inks. All you do is lay down your stencil, pick up some ink with a sponge dauber, and pounce it over the stencil. I didn't really have any trouble with the ink bleeding underneath the stencil. As you can see here, it made a really nice clean image. And the pure ink is really vibrant and lovely all on its own through with the stencil, though of course you can use sprays like the ones that I made in the beginning of this video, but if you want a vibrant, more opaque-ish sort of look, then this is probably the technique you want. If you use it thickly, it will be dark, but lighter colors will still have a transparent quality to them, while darker colors will seem more opaque. The exception I've noticed so far is the yellow ochre. For some reason it seems to be quite opaque despite being a light color. I mixed it here with green and Van Dyke brown to make a light olivey green for the stems, and it actually covered pretty solidly for being so light. But yeah, so stenciling is another good option for these inks. Okay, now this last one is less a technique and more so a cautionary tale. This is Golden Soft Gel Gloss, and it has been suggested by the internet as a substitute for Mod Podge. And I've seen it used before in mixed media, so it's not a problem. Okay, fine, great. So I globbed it on willy-nilly and started spreading it with the foam brush and this. See this terrible streaking right here? Yeah, I saw it too. So my assumption was that one of the drips I had made or one of the stamps I had done wasn't quite dry when I started spreading it, and I had wiped it over the sunflower, which is the sunflower that I painted in the waterproof watercolor example earlier in this video. So there were dark streaks on it. So I used a clean foam brush to try and lift the medium off to get rid of those dark streaks. And then I realized it was lifting up not only the white Posca pen I had used for highlights on it, but also the black India ink that I had used to add extra outline and details, and the India ink I had used to paint the actual flower. I have no idea what is in the soft gel gloss medium, but somehow it reactivates the India inks and allows them to be lifted off of the paper. Now at this point in my art journal, I was panicking, and I removed it with some paper towel as gently as I possibly could while trying to disrupt the page as little as possible. So this was an absolute disaster because I had no idea that it was going to happen. However, after I calmed down a little bit, I realized that actually this could be a really valuable thing, because it means that if you decide that something is not the way that you want it and you don't want to use white gesso to cover it or something to build up layers, you could potentially apply this or something similar to the page and lift off the otherwise permanent ink. And it did remove everything pretty cleanly. Almost all of that stamped writing, which was done with black India ink, disappeared. And that was me lifting up the excess gel medium as gently as I could with that paper towel because I didn't want it to smudge. So I feel like with a little more testing and finesse, this could possibly be a way to modify things that you have applied India ink to without adding more layers if you don't want to. But also the cautionary tale side of this story is to definitely test sealants on a small section of your journal page or on a separate page entirely before you just throw it on willy-nilly and end up erasing half of your art journal spread. But yeah, with that, there's 10 different ways that you can use India inks. Well, 9 ways, and number 10 was sort of a stupid accident, but you get the idea. I will link to the art journal page that showcases India inks if you're interested. I used them with minimal additional supplies to make this Alice-themed spread in an altered book. But yeah, please let me know if you like art supply showcases like this. Maybe I'll do them periodically if I come across a versatile art supply that I want to talk about. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see about checking them out. Please subscribe if you like art journaling, and check out my other videos on this topic, with more to come most definitely. And until next time, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye!